Hi, my name's Mike Jones. I'm an editor at Simon Schuster Publishers. I have with me today Sonke Neitzel, German historian and author of Soldaten, co-author with Harald Welzer. Soldaten, on fighting, killing and dying, the secret Second World War tapes of German POWs, which we've recently published to great acclaim. Sonke, the book was born from the discovery of hours of secretly taped conversations the Allies made of German prisoners of war talking amongst themselves after they'd been captured and had been taken to British prisoner of war camps. How on earth did you discover the existence of these extraordinary documents?
It was just by chance. In 2001 I came across a book from Michael Gannon on the Battle of the Atlantic. Black May was the title of that book. And Michael Gannon published a few pages of secretly recorded conversations, of these bugging reports in his book. And I came across that and thought, well, I knew that there were interrogation reports, but I never heard about bugging reports. So I was really fascinated by this source, and originally at this time I wanted to write a book on the German Navy. I then skipped that. So then I flew down from Glasgow to London to figure that out. And in November 2001, here they were, these folders.
Where had they been kept?
In the Public Record Office in Kew Gardens. And they were released in 1996. So they were released since 5 years. A bulk of about 40 to 50,000 pages of paper, quite a big amount of paper. And I mean, the sheer amount of paper protected these documents of being discovered, because for a single person it's very, very hard to get a clue. What is that? When was that made? Because there's no explanation. Only the sheer document, the sheer bugging reports, and no explanation on was there, this was there, and these are the prisoners and so on.
So when were you first able to start sitting down and reading them yourself? And how and when did you know how important they were?
I mean, in the first time in November when I was in PR, I ordered probably 3 files, and I immediately discovered this is a totally new source, and there must be more. And obviously, I realized even at that moment I'm standing on an iceberg. It was just the tip of an iceberg I found. But I mean, it took me a while to realize the whole process of the bugging and all the things. So I came back to London in 2002, and I think so after half a year about that, I realized, oh, this is really a big treasure, and we have to make something out of it.
Obviously, within the book and within the coverage, a lot is revealed, which is quite shocking. The conversations they have about what crimes the German soldiers committed in the Second World War. It's quite shocking. When did you first start seeing this sort of banality of evil within the documents, and what was most shocking for you?
I think the problem of this document is you're reading this hours, days, weeks, and you ask yourself, what's the point? Because everything is in there. It's everyday's chatter, it's gossip. You have every thinkable opinion, pro-Nazi, anti-Nazi, everything is there. So after months of reading, you think, what's the point of that? And then I think it was not before 2005 where I thought, well, the real point is the banality of the perception. It's like everyday people speaking about violence, and they regarded violence as absolutely normal, as given. Like we regard other things normal. We regarded for decades the Cold War as given. Or that we have 2 Germanys. It was just given that there was a war in Berlin. It was just given. We don't question that. Although you could question that if there should be a war in between West and East Berlin. And this is somehow a very banal perception, and also a shocking perception, because how they perceived war crimes, atrocities. And they talked about these awful things like 2 bricklayers talking about building a house. But it took a while really to get that point, because the variety of conversations is so huge in that material.
In Germany, the book was released 12 months or so before in UK and America, indeed. It became a bestseller overnight, I should say, but it was also published to a huge amount of controversy. And I think, if I'm right in saying that the controversy in Germany was that these were, on the whole, normal Wehrmacht, straight down the line army soldiers, and not the SS, but they were talking about committing atrocity. Am I right in saying that? And do you think that's a big mind shift change in the way Germans perceive the war?
I would say yes and no. I mean, that the Wehrmacht was a criminal institution and committed all kinds of war crimes was already reached the public in the second half of the 90s. So we had a big exhibition, the Wehrmacht exhibition. There was a big discussion, big public debate on that. So the majority, I think, of the German people realized, well, the Wehrmacht was committed all these kinds of war crimes, was part of a criminal system. But I mean, if you read these conversations, it's a different approach. So if you can realize in a theoretical approach, yes, German soldiers were committing these war crimes. But if you read conversations, when they're talking about raping, killing, dying, the impact is much, much bigger. And I think much more Germans became convinced they were part of a criminal system, and they regarded it as normal. And a lot of people then had problems to explain that. And this is also what we try to do in this book, not only to say, oh, look how awful that is. I think we go a step further and say, why is it so normal for them? And then we came to the banality of war, and then how ordinary soldiers can do these things they never thought about.
I suppose that very neatly, in a way, brings me to a sort of final question, which is, you in that answer there went from talking about these individual German soldiers talking about raping, killing, dying in a very banal, matter-of-fact way. But then at the end of there, you were talking about how soldiers in general, and of course the book is just called Soldaten, soldiers in English. Do you, having gone through all this material, having worked with Harald, having thought about this deeply, do you think that the way that these German soldiers under the Nazi regime in the Second World War talk about raping, killing, dying was unique to them? Or do you think that we have lessons to learn for all soldiers in general and the way we send men off to war?
I think there is something to learn in there. I don't think that it is that specific, the kind of the conversation. Obviously, the Second World War was specific, and the war on the Eastern Front is not comparable to Afghanistan or so. It was a different war. Obviously, these people were living in the Third Reich society, so which is not comparable to the German society or the British society in particular. And obviously, they had an impact. This society had an impact on their world perceptions. But, and there is a but, I think the way they perceived their world is very much comparable to nowadays. I mean, they just wanted to do their job. They were striving for social acceptance. They wanted to get promotions. They were unpolitically. Not to say that ideology absolutely doesn't play a role, but in the end, they were not interested in politics. And this is very much comparable to nowadays. I mean, if you ask soldiers serving in Afghanistan, they might not be able to give you an explanation why are they there. It's probably also not important for them. It's important to serve. It's important to be promoted. It's important to get a medal. It's important to be regarded as a good soldier from your fellow soldiers. And they're not talking about the suffering of the Afghan population. It's much more important if they have casualties. But they're not talking about, oh, yeah, we might kill 200 of Afghan people and we lose only one. So these, I would call it grammar of war, grammar of modern warfare is, I think, very interesting. And there is an element of similarities. And this is quite interesting, I think.
Well, thank you very much, Sonke. I could talk with you all day about it, but we only have a limited amount of time. Soldaten by Sonke Neitzel and Harald Welzer is an extraordinary, incredible book. I think it'll go down in history. You are a historian, of course, but I think it's a very, very important book as well. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for talking to me today.
My pleasure. Thank you.